ॐ विश्वंदर्पण दृश्यमान नगरी तुल्यन्निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिर्गोद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यस्साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयम् तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तन्तोटकं वातिककारमन्यान् अस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततमानतोऽस्मि श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः परब्रह्मनिष्ठं स्वतो धर्मनिष्ठम् अहिंसैकनिष्ठं स्वशिष्यैः सुजुष्टं यतीनां वरिष्ठं गुरूणां गरिष्ठं दयानन्दरूपं मदाचार्यमीडे नमः श्रीपरमार्थाय संसाराभ्यासनाशिने श्रोत्रियब्रह्मनिष्ठाय तस्मै ब्रह्मविदे नमः सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् ॐ तपोभिः क्षीणपापानां शान्तानां वीतरागिणां मुमुक्षूणामपेक्ष्योऽयम् आत्मबोधो विधीयते. So I welcome you all to the 6th class of the Atma Bodha series. We will read verses number 5, 6, and 7 that we had done in the last class and do a recap of what we had studied before we move forward. And I will say this verse and you can repeat after me. So Shadaji, you can repeat after me all these 3 verses. Ajnana-kalushan jeevam
अज्ञानकलुषं जीवम्
ज्ञानाभ्यासाद्विनिर्मलम्
ज्ञानाभ्यासाद्विनिर्मलम्
कृत्वा ज्ञानं स्वयं नश्येत्
कृत्वा ज्ञानं स्वयं नश्येत्
जलं कतकरेणुवत्
जलं कतकरेणुवत्
संसारस्वप्नतुल्यो हि
संसारस्वप्नतुल्यो हि
रागद्वेषादिसङ्कुलः
रागद्वेषादिसङ्कुलः
स्वकाले सत्यवत् भाति
स्वकाले सत्यवद्भाति
प्रबोधे सत्यसत् भवेत्
प्रबोधे सत्यसत् भवेत्
तावत् सत्यं जगद्भाति
तावत् सत्यं जगद्भाति
शुक्तिकारजतं यथा
शुक्तिकारजतं यथा
यावन्न ज्ञायते ब्रह्म
यावन्न ज्ञायते ब्रह्म
सर्वाधिष्ठानमद्वयम्
सर्वाधिष्ठानमद्वयम्.
So, Bhagavad-pada is teaching us the fundamentals of Vedanta in the first few verses. In the vision of Vedanta, the Jivaha is already Purnaha, limitless, full and complete. But due to Ajnanam, due to Atma Ajnanam, the Jiva doesn't know his real nature. Therefore, he has concluded that I am deficient, wanting, inadequate, I am Apurnaha. And then the Jivaha cannot stand being Apurnaha, and therefore he is trying to become Purnaha. He is trying to become Purnaha. So the Purnaha Jiva is trying to become Purnaha. It's a peculiar situation. It happens purely because of Atma Ajnanam. And then he gets involved in this endless struggle to try to become Purnaha. So the solution for this is to remove the Ajnana. And that happens through knowledge alone. So in verse number 5, Bhagavad is telling us, Ajnana Kalusham Jivam. This Jiva who's polluted with this impurity of Ajnanam. And when we say Ajnanam, pure Ajnanam itself doesn't directly cause samsara. In fact, we say ignorance is bliss. Pure ignorance alone, like in deep sleep, I'm ignorant. But then the superimposition, the adhyasa is not there. And therefore samsara also is not there. Therefore, Ajnanam causes samsara only through adhyasa or superimposition. Therefore, this jivaha who's polluted with the impurity of Ajnanam and adhyasa is implied here. So such a jiva, jnanabhyasad vinirmalam kritva. So he becomes purified. How? Through jnanabhyasaha. And we looked at what jnanabhyasaha is. It is the 5-stepped process comprising of karma yoga, upasana yoga, shravanam, mananam, and nididhyasanam. So karma yoga leads to chitta shuddhihi, purity of the mind. Upasana yoga leads to integration of the mind. Shravanam brings about knowledge. Mananam brings conviction. And nididhyasanam brings about the assimilation of this knowledge and transformation because of the knowledge. So through this process of jnana abhyasaha, this jivaha gets purified. Vinirmalam kritva. And what happens? Jnanam swayam nashyet. This jnana vritti, this aham brahmasmi vritti, akhandakara vrittihi, the atmakara vrittihi that arises, it removes the ajnana. And once its job is done, then this jnana vritti also goes away. So he gives the example of jalang kataka renuvat. Exactly like in impure water, we put this powder of the kataka nut. And when that is done, this powder forms some kind of a film and then removes these impurities by settling down. So the impurities go away and the powder also goes away. What is left is the pure water. So similarly, Brahman is there and Ajnanam is there to begin. But then this Jnana Vritti arises. The Jnana Vritti removes the Ajnana. And finally, we see that the Ajnanam has gone, but the Jnana Vritti is also gone. So a Brahmajnani says, I am Brahman. I am the non-dual. Advaita Brahma, I am. And he doesn't say, I am the Brahman with the Jnanam. He doesn't even say, I am a Brahmagyani. Brahmagyani says, I am Brahman. Brahmavid, Brahmaiva Bhavati. We also saw the example of a dream. When I am in the dream, when a lion comes in the dream, the roar of the lion awakens me from the dream. But when I awaken from the dream, not only the dream goes away, but the lion that awakened me in the dream also goes away. So similarly, this jnana vritti that comes in and awakens me to my own Brahman nature. Once I know my own Brahman nature, I am awakened to my Brahman nature, and the jnana vritti also goes away. Then in verse number 6, we introduced Satyam and Mithya. Satyam and Mithya. We looked at the example of the bangle. We said when we inquire into the bangle, we find that there is no substance called the bangle. The substance is the gold only. Gold is the saraha. Saraha of the bangle. When I touch the bangle, I am touching the gold. When I weigh the bangle, I am weighing the gold. So gold is the essence of the bangle. Then gold is also nityaha. Saraha and nityaha. Before the bangle was, the gold was there. Even now, when the bangle is, gold is there. And even after the bangle melts and goes away, or something else comes in its place, the gold still remains. So gold is nityaha. And then gold is also satyaha. What exists is the gold only. The bangle appears to exist. Bangle is only a name given to a particular form of the gold. The bangle exists only on my tongue. It's a word that exists only on my tongue. Bangle has no other existence. So when we say that bangle exists and gold exists, Vedanta says that the language is not enough to distinguish the two types of existence that are involved here. Gold is independently existent, whereas bangle is dependently existent. Therefore, gold is given the status of being satyam, whereas bangle is mithya. Independently existent is satyam, one that is dependently existent, meaning which only appears to exist, which is just nama rupa, is mithya. Then we came up with two satyam mithya principles. And mithya can never exist without a satyam adhishthanam. So mithya doesn't have its own existence. It cannot exist without the satyam adhishthanam. And then the second principle is that when the satyam is not known, then the mithya itself is mistaken to be the satyam. When the sand is not known, the mirage water is mistaken to be satyam. When the gold, satyam gold is not known, then the mithya bangle is mistaken to be satyam. When the satyam waker is not known, the mithya dream is mistaken to be satyam. So this is the example that Bhagavad is giving in verse number 6. Samsaraha swapna tulyo hi. He's comparing this world where I am a limited individual and I see this separate world. He's comparing this to swapna. Swapna tulyo hi. It's like the dream. So when two things are being compared, we should always ask, what is the commonality between the two? Why are they being compared? The reason Bhagavad is saying samsaraha swapna tulyaha is because both are mithya. So the first question to ask is, how is the dream mithya? How is the swapnavastha mithya? So we say, when one is in the dream, then the dream appears to be very real. Swakale satyavat bhati. It appears to be very real. The dreamer will never agree that the dream is a dream in dream. For the dreamer is not a dream in dream. For the dreamer, it's very, very real. And then what happens? When the dreamer wakes up, when he knows the adhishthanam, when he knows the adhishthanam, what is the adhishthanam of the dream? It's the waker. So what is the process of waking up? Process of waking up is nothing but knowing the waker, knowing that I am the waker. So when he knows that I am the waker, when the knowledge of the adhishthanam is gained, then he understands that the limited individual and the separate world that I had seen in the dream, that is mithya. It was all dependent upon me. It never had any independent existence. And then he is also simultaneously freed of all the problems that he was encountering in the dream. Because the Satyam waker is never affected by the problems of the Mithya dream, because they are in two different orders of reality. Mithya can never ever affect the Satyam. So similarly, we come to this world. Now, how is this world Mithya? So in this world, I am seeing that I am this limited individual, and then there is this separately existing world, much like the dream. And it all appears to be very real. And Bhagavad gives the additional qualification, Ragat Dveshadi Sankulaha. So this limited individual takes himself to be Apurnaha. And then he sees this separate world, and then he says, now if I have to gain some Purnatvam, I can only gain it from this world. He sees a very subjective world. I like this, I don't like this. So he runs towards the objects of his raga, objects of his liking. He runs away from the objects of his dislike, the objects of his dvesha. So he is constantly running around in the world, trying to adjust the world according to his likes and dislikes. Raga dvesha adi sankula. But then no matter what he does, his life is a struggle. And there's suffering. He says, I am suffering. Swakale Satyavad Bhati, it all appears to be very real. If you were to come and tell this individual that really speaking you are Brahman and this entire thing you are saying, it's all in you. You are the Adhishthanam, and is the this is the mithya that is superimposed on you, the Adhishthanam. You say, what are you talking about? This is all very real. Swakale Satyavad Bhati. But then when Brahmajnanam rises, when he understands the Adhishthanam, when he knows the Adhishthanam Brahma, then he understands that all this, the separate individual and the separate world, this limited individual in this separate world, and all of this struggle and suffering, etc., only mithya, not the Satya. Prabodhe sati asat bhavet. When one awakens to the knowledge of the adhishthanam, then one understands that this entire thing is mithya. And we saw the other similarity between this and swapna in the four-stage process of PEFS. Project, enter, forget, and suffer. So when we look at the dream, how the dream arises, initially the waker goes to sleep. And in that deep sleep, there is ajnanam of the waker. The ignorance of the waker is there. And then this is followed by the projection of this dream world. So the P, projection happens. And then one enters this dream world. The entry is also there. One enters this dream world as this body and mind. Dream body and dream mind. So up to this stage also, really speaking, there need not be any problem. The projection and entry itself need not cause any problem. Why? Well, let's imagine that I am watching a movie on a big screen TV. And then I myself, let us say, become a character in the movie. And I can watch this movie knowing very well that the whole thing is false. I can even enjoy the movie. In fact, this is what people watch movies for the sake of entertainment. Or there are people have come up with smarter ways to entertain yourself these days where people can wear these glasses. Some kind of glasses are there. I have not really worn one or seen what it produces, but I can imagine what it must be like because I've read about it. So it produces some kind of a virtual world. Virtual world. And then you can also enter that virtual world as some avatara. They call it avatara. So your own avatara enters that virtual world. So this wording of avatara is actually very interesting, how they came up with that. It seems to be very apt for this kind of a situation, where you're the character that represents you in this virtual world, that is called the avatar. And then you can do something as you move your body, that character in the dream also does the same thing and can run around and do a lot of things in the virtual world. So as long as I know that the whole thing is false, it doesn't create any suffering or any samsara, any struggle. But then there's the crucial third step, F step. One forgets that I am the waker. And when one forgets that, then two things happen simultaneously. I become that limited individual in that virtual world. And then the virtual world becomes the real world. Both of these happen. The F step, P, project, enter, then forget. And what happens? That there is struggle and suffering. Struggle and suffering are the consequence. Now, how does one get out of this struggle and suffering? Know that this world is a virtual world. It is not the reality. Both this individual as well as this world that are projected are both virtual. They are not the reality. This is what happens when one comes to know the adhishthanam. When one knows I am the waker, then the whole dream world is reduced to mithya. Prabodhe sati asat bhave. So we are saying the same thing is happening here also, that you are really Brahman. You are the adhishthanam of this whole thing. But then with your Maya Shakti, you have projected this. You have projected the entire thing. And then you have also entered this world that is projected as this avatar, a mini avatar. Projection and entry has happened. So far, even up to this point, it needn't cause any problem. As long as the forgetting is not there. For a jnani, that forgetting is not there. He knows the adhishtanam, so he enjoys this projection and entry. He can appreciate the glory of Maya. But then, what is the glory of the jivaha? That there is forgetting of the vehicle. Once one forgets, the game is over. Because this limited individual is taken to be the reality. This separate world is taken to be the reality. And then there is constant running around, samsara, struggle. and suffering. One ends up with, I am suffering. So what is the solution to this? Know the Adhisthana. What is the Adhisthana? Brahman. And one knows the Adhisthana as I am Brahman, then one understands that the whole thing is not the absolute reality. It is an appearance in me. So there's just the projection continues. The entry is also there, but this forgetting and suffering is not there anymore. So this is why Bhagavad Pada says, Samsaraha swapna tulyo hi. And then in verse number 7, Bhagavad Pada talks about the awakening. Tavat satyam jagat bhati yavan na jnayate brahma. Tavat satyam, yavat tavat means as long as something, so long something. Like we say, if something, then something. So as long as is yavat, until then is tavat. So as long as yavat na jnayate brahma, as long as Brahman is not known, avat satyam jagat bhati, until then the entire world appears to be very real. I am a limited individual. This world, separate world, is the reality. So once Brahma is known, once Brahman is known, then one understands this is mithya. And what type of Brahman is this? Sarvadhisthanamatva. The adhisthana of everything, subject as well as the object. And it is non-dual, means it is Advaita Brahma. It is the only reality. It is the Satyam. Everything else is in a lower order of reality. There is no second thing to limit it at all. And how is this Brahman known? There is only one way to know Brahman, as I am Brahman. Just as one awakens from the dream and says, I am the waker. One awakens from this dreamlike existence and only when one understands that I am Brahman. So I am the adhishthanam of this whole thing, and I am this Advaita Satyam. I alone really exist. All of this is an appearance in me. And Bhagavad Pada gives the example, Shuktika Rajatan Yatha. So when the shell is not known, then the shell in sunlight, the shell appears to have this bright reflection. And when the shell is not known, one mistakes it to be silver. And one runs towards it. How long does this mistake of silver persist? As long as the adhishthanam, the shuktika is not known. And as long as the shuktika is not known, the rajatam is taken to be the satyam. So similarly here as well. As long as the adhishthanam Brahma is not known, the entire thing is taken to be Sattva. So now we move to verse number 8. Upadane khilādhāre
उपादानेऽखिलाधारे
jaganti parameshvare
जगन्ति परमेश्वरे
sargasthitilayān yanti
सर्गस्थितिलयान् यान्ति
budbudāni vavarini.
बुद्बुदानीव वारिणी.
This verse is not there in some texts of Atma Bodha. Some texts have it and others don't. Therefore, there is some verse numbering confusion maybe there based on the text that you are following. You may not find this verse in your text. But since I have given the PDF, We can go with the verse numbering and the verses in the PDF. So here Bhagavad says, Upadane khiladhare parameshware. Upadane akhiladhare parameshware. We have to understand these terms. Upadane parameshware. So we will get the background first and then get into this verse. There is no effect without a cause. Without a cause, there cannot be any effect. And this world is an effect because there was a point in time when this world was not there in this form. Therefore, the world is an effect. The question is, what caused this world? Now, the science has been looking into the same problem. And they have come up with the Big Bang being the cause for this world. So science says that the Big Bang happened some 13.5 billion years ago. And before this Big Bang, there was none of this. And Big Bang spewed out all this matter that was required to make up this world. But then science hasn't really answered a lot of fundamental questions. Like how this matter, all this matter that was spewed out, how that came about and organized itself in such an intelligent manner in the form of this cosmos that works, really works like clockwork. That's the first thing. The second thing is, how did all this matter come together and give rise to consciousness? How did sentient beings arise? And then, what caused the Big Bang? What was there that caused the Big Bang? So science has not really provided any answers to these questions. What Vedanta says is that science is a bit like this blind person who's touching an elephant and happens to touch the tail of the elephant and says that the elephant is some thin, long thing. Right? So you get a very limited view of what the elephant is. And science is blinded primarily because of the pramanas it uses. Because the means of knowledge that are available to science, they only pratyaksha and anumana and a few other pramanas. Therefore, science has to derive whatever it can using that. Vedanta says science has a very incomplete picture of the whole thing. So what does Vedanta say? What is the cause of this world? Vedanta says that before this world emerged, consciousness was there. Consciousness is primary in Vedanta. Well, it's a lot more easier to explain how matter emerges out of consciousness than it is to explain how consciousness emerges out of matter. So consciousness, a conscious being was there before this world came into existence. So why do we need this conscious being? As we say that we can only give supporting logic for this. The final authority are the words of Vedanta, words of the Vedas, that reveal to us that Ishvara was there. There is no other way to know this through pratyaksha and anumana. We have to rely on the words of Veda, the Shabda Pramana of the Veda and Vedanta. But we can give some supporting logic for this. We can give supporting logic for this. What is the supporting logic? The logic is as follows. Suppose we see some intelligently put together thing in this world. For example, let's take this phone. This phone is intelligently put together. We say it's intelligently put together. Why? Because there is a lot of knowledge and skill that goes into the creation of the phone. So in fact, yesterday I asked ChatGPT about how many periodic table elements go into the making of this smartphone. And then ChatGPT, as usual, came out with a very, very comprehensive answer to the question. And it rattled out 50 elements in the periodic table, 50 elements. And it was very fascinating to see that, what it talked about. And I'll just briefly mention the things that it came up with. For example, it said the processor has got silicon and phosphorus and boron in it. The battery has got lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, graphite. The display has got indium, tin, oxygen, aluminum, gallium, arsenic, and so on. It just rattled out these things. Well, I found it pretty amazing to look at that list. And even the antenna has got some specific elements. So now let's imagine that if somebody takes these 50 elements of the periodic table and dumps them all together on top of one another and then waits for it to turn into a smartphone. What is the probability of that happening? You will never ever get this. So it's pretty amazing to think that science thinks the world came about in this manner. It's pretty ridiculous actually to think that happens. So we say that all of these elements, them coming together, right? There's a lot of intelligence involved, a lot of knowledge, a lot of material science. Which material should be used in what component? If we use boron, for example, in the antenna or silicon in the antenna, and you use oxygen in the processor, that's not going to work. What goes there? Where? Right? All this knowledge is involved. And then I also asked ChatGPT about this nanometer technology that is there in the smartphones. And it talked about 5 nanometer, 3 nanometer technology, etc., where the etchings are done on the silicon chip. Such fine etchings are done for all the wirings between the components that they're really 10 nanometers or so apart. So it's a very deliberate design that involves a blueprint. Such a design can only emerge if there is a blueprint for the design, an intent behind the design. So we say that there is a lot of knowledge, a lot of intelligence involved, and such intelligence and knowledge requires an intelligent cause. A maker is required. So similarly, we come to this world from the smartphone. So far, we were in the example of the smartphone. Now we come to this world. This world has got so much intelligence. Let's leave aside the smartphone, saying that it is an artificial creation. Let's leave that aside. Let us look at this world. It has got so much knowledge and intelligence. For example, you take a plant. How does this plant produce food? Using light and carbon dioxide. It's pretty amazing. We survive. Our bodies survive based on the food the plants produce. So what are the materials that are used there? What are the elements of the periodic table that go into it? It's pretty amazing. And people are still struggling to understand this process. There is a lot of knowledge and intelligence involved. People are trying to recreate something like this. They have not been successful. Or we take our own bodies. We have this immune system that's able to fight against foreign bodies and enter the body. Or we take the nervous system, relaying, relaying electrical currents throughout the body. Or the circulatory system, there is a heart that has been pumping. Heart is designed to pump for 80, 90 years. As a human being designed a pump that pumps 80, 90 years. Every 7 years or 10 years, we have to change our pump in the sump because it gets rusted or something happens. And if the heart misses a beat for a few moments, it's over. Life is over. Just pretty amazing how much knowledge and skill is involved in the creation of this body and in the creation of the world around us that sustains bodies like this. So we say again, since this whole thing has to be intelligently put together, there must be a place where the knowledge, the intelligence resides. Therefore, we say that there must be a maker for this. There must be an intelligent maker. So then the next question is, let's take the example of a pot. So the creator of a pot is a potter. So the potter must have knowledge and skill to create the pot. Ghatakarta, ghatagnya. You take this cloth. The maker of this cloth must have the knowledge and skill to create this cloth. So patakarta, patakya. So now, what about the maker of the entire thing? Sarvasya karta. What must be this maker be like? We say sarvasya karta sarvagyaha. The maker of all this must have the knowledge of producing all this. Therefore, that maker must be sarvagyaha, meaning omniscient, should have knowledge of every little detail of what is going on here. Now, this much we can arrive at. Using reasonable supporting logic, we can arrive at this. But then now our minds tend to look for this maker. We tend to search for the maker. And therefore, whenever we talk to somebody locally, we know the maker is not locally present. Even if we talk to Albert Einstein, let's say we bring Albert Einstein, who knows so much about this, and I talk to him in Hindi, then he will not understand a word of what I'm talking. So he is clearly not Sarvagya. So I look around, I don't find anybody who's Sarvagya. And therefore, we conveniently place the Sarvagya maker in some heaven. So we say that this Sarvagya is not available locally. And therefore, let's place him in some heaven somewhere. Now, I always think of a product as being different from the creator of the product. For example, let's say I take a pot. In the pot, the created pot is different from the potter. I take this cloth. I don't even know where the creator of this is. He must be somewhere. The creator must definitely be different from this cloth. So I'm applying the same kind of logic here, that this world is a created product. The creator must be somewhere, sitting in some corner somewhere. And that corner, we call it heaven. But there are lots of problems with this idea of placing God in heaven. Because if we place God in heaven, this intelligent maker, which we'll call the intelligent cause, or in other words, God. If we place this intelligent cause, God in heaven, then a question arises, who created heaven? So then one will have to say, God created heaven. Who else? So then we'll have to ask, where was God before he created heaven? Where was God before he created heaven? Then there is no answer. Or they say you ask too many questions. Don't ask these kinds of questions because God is very mysterious. And therefore, you are asking too many questions. Let's just accept that God is in heaven and move on. And then there is other question that comes about. That where did God get all this material from? Material. So not just maker is required. The intelligent cause is not enough. For example, let's say the potter is sitting there, but there is no clay. What pot is he going to make? The weaver is sitting there, but no threads. How can he create clothes? So you placed God in heaven. But where is all the material? How did he create this jagat? Again, no answer for this. And now, with the progress of science, we even understand that space and time are also relative. This Vedanta had declared long time ago. But science has discovered it more recently. Prior to Einstein, even science thought that space was absolute, time was absolute. But that idea was demolished by the theory of relativity. So, given that space and time are also not absolute, and even space at some point was not there, time was not there, then where do you place this heaven? Well, if space is not there, where is heaven then? Again, no answer for it. Therefore, what is Vedanta's vision regarding this? What does Vedanta reveal? As we said, Vedanta says that before this universe came into being, came into existence, the intelligent cause was there. The intelligent cause was there. Ishvara was there. And since we said that Ishvara is of the nature of consciousness, consciousness can happily exist without space and time. Can exist without space and time. No problem. So Ishvara transcends even space and time. Space and time emerge in consciousness. And space and time can get resolved back into consciousness. But consciousness can exist without space and time. So there is no problem. Okay. But I will ask you the same question. The person who's the God in heaven person, he says. I'll ask you the same question then. Where did God get the material from? You're saying that if you ask me that question, I have the right to ask you the same question. I will ask you the same question. What is your answer for that? He thinks he has cornered Vedanta. But then Vedanta points out that yes, before space and time was there, the intelligent cause is there, all right. So the intelligent cause cannot get the material from somewhere in space. It's not possible. And where did he get the material from? They say that he finds the material within himself. Finds the material within himself. That means that Ishvara is not just the maker, the intelligent cause, but also the material cause also. The Ishvara himself becomes the world. Ishvara becomes this world because Ishvara is both the maker and the material. What's an example of this? Vedanta provides the example of yathorna nabhi srujate grinhate cha. Yathorna nabhi srujate grinhate cha tathaksharat Sambhavati Havishwam, says the Mundaka Upanishad. Exactly like the spider. You take the example of a spider. Where does the spider find the material to create the web? The spider finds the material within itself and it weaves a beautiful web. So the spider is not just the intelligent cause, the maker, but the spider is also the material. The silk that it uses to weave the web. And the spider is also able to resolve the web into itself. Because sometimes you see the spider hanging from the rooftop. It's hanging by this thin thread. If you go and touch the spider, just a little bit, the spider goes up, climbs up. But then as it's climbing up the web, the thread is no longer there. Where did it go? It goes back into the spider. Or we can take the example of the dream also. The waker is there. And then the waker goes to sleep and projects this dream world. So who's the intelligent cause? The waker. Where did he find the material for the dream sun, the dream moon, the dream stars, etc.? Finds the material within himself. The Nidra Shakti provides the material. The vasanas in the mind of the waker, they provide the material for the dream. So similarly, this world emerges out of Ishvara. Ishvara transcends space and time. Space and time emerge out of Ishvara. The world emerges out of Ishvara, it is sustained by Ishvara, and it goes back into Ishvara. And Ishvara, therefore, called the Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karanam. The intelligent cause is called the Nimitta Karanam. Nimitta Karanam. The material cause is called the Upadana Karanam. And Ishvara is both the maker and the material. Ishvara becomes the Abhinna Nimitta Upadana Karanam. So now the question is, what are the components of Ishvara? What makes up Ishvara? So we have already talked about one of the components, which is consciousness. So there is this imperishable, all-pervading consciousness. Imperishable, all-pervading, changeless consciousness is the first component of Ishvara. The imperishable, all-pervading, changeless consciousness is there before the world comes into being. And this imperishable, all-pervading, changeless consciousness is Satyam, meaning that it is independently existent. And this Ishvara is the material cause, meaning the Upadana Karanam. Material cause, Upadana Karanam. So this independent, imperishable, all-pervading, changeless consciousness, which we call Brahman. Brahman is the Upadana Karanam, material cause for the entire creation. We don't stop with saying that it is just the Upadana Karanam. We say it's the Vivarta Upadana Karanam, meaning it's a changeless material cause. It doesn't undergo any change in the production of this wood. Like the rope is there. The rope doesn't undergo any change in the production of the snake. The rope remains as it is. It is the Adhishthana, changeless Adhishthana. Similarly, Brahman is the Vivarta Upadana Karana, changeless material. But then naturally a question arises that Brahman alone cannot then account for this plurality of this world. We see so many diverse things here. How did all this come about? We say we have to bring in the second factor, which is Maya. What is Maya? As we saw in Tattva Bodha, Brahmashraya Maya Asti. Sattva Rajas Tamo Gunatmika Brahmashraya Maya Asti. Maya is dependent upon Brahman for its existence and therefore it is mithya. But then Maya contains this blueprint for the entire Jagat. Like we talked about, this blueprint for the smartphone is in somebody's mind. That's how the smartphone comes about. The blueprint for the entire Jagat is in Maya. So all these names and forms that are going to appear in the Jagat, they're all in Maya, in an unmanifest form. Exactly like we saw that the tree, the entire tree, all the details of the tree to emerge are in an unmanifest form in the seed. Or the entire details of the movie that emerges are in an unmanifest form in the DVD. Or the entire dream world that emerges is in an unmanifest form in the mind of the waker. So similarly, the entire world that is about to emerge is in an unmanifest form in Maya. So Maya contains all the unmanifest names and forms that are about to be thrown out in the creation. And Maya, unlike Brahman, is also a material cause because it provides the names and forms. But it's a changing material cause. Therefore, it's called the Parinami Upadana Karanam, changing material. Like milk changes into curd. Milk is the cause for the curd, but milk changes to curd in the process of producing the curd. So Brahman remains changeless. Maya is what changes to produce this world. So how does this projection happen? Like the dream gets projected from the mind of the waker due to the pressure of the vasanas. Pressure of the vasanas throws out this dream which is there in the mind of the waker. So similarly, we say that the pressure of the fructifying karmas of the jivas results in Maya throwing out these names and forms in the form of this Jagat. So we say Karana Gunaha Karye Anuvartante. We saw this in our Tattva Bodha classes. Karana Gunaha Karye Anuvartante, meaning the attributes of the cause persist in the effect. And since Maya is mithya, its product, that is the world, is also mithya. And therefore the world is also doesn't have its own independent existence. The world depends upon Brahman for its existence. So Brahman undergoes no change. It just provides the existence and consciousness. And therefore with Maya, one Brahman, one Satyam Brahma alone appears to become many. Now, just as in the dream, we go back to our dream example, there's projection of two things that happen. Projection of the insentient world and projection of the sentient beings. This happens in our dream. So similarly, this twofold projection happens in this world also. There's projection of the insentient world. And then there is projection of the sentient beings. The Bhogya Prapancha is there. The experienced world is projected. And the Bhokta Jivaha is also projected. The experiencer Jivaha. is also projected. The bodies of the jiva are projected. So this eighth verse here talks about projection of the insentient worlds. And the ninth verse talks about the projection of these individual sentient beings. So now let us look at the exact words of this verse number 8. Upadane akhiladhare parameshware. So upadana refers to the material cause, the content of anything. And as we said, so what he is saying is that in this upadane akhiladhare, that is the substratum, adhishthanam of this whole thing. Upadane akhiladhare parameshware, also known as Parameshwara. We will come to that. But upadana is the material cause or the content. And as we said, it is vivarta upadana karanam, changeless material cause. So in this changeless material cause, these worlds appear. That is what he is wanting to say. So the material cause is the Satyam. And every name and form is a name and form of the Satyam. It is a material cause alone appearing in different names and forms. But the Satyam itself undergoes no change in the production of the names and forms. Therefore, when he says Upadane here, he is referring to the material cause, that is the Satyam. And the Satyam itself doesn't undergo any change in the production of the Mithya. Now, another important thing to note is that, as we have said, there is no Mithya other than the Satyam. So the dream world cannot exist independent of the Vaker, which is the Upadana, the material cause. Similarly, this world here cannot exist independent of Brahman, which is the Upadana Karanam. We think of this world as separately existing, but this world really exists in Brahman alone. It doesn't exist independent of Brahman, the Upadana Karanam. And this Upadana Karanam is Akhiladhare. This content, the material cause, that is Brahman, is the adhishthanam of everything, the support of everything. Just as the waker is the support of the dream. Why does it have to be the support of everything? Because nothing in this everything that we are talking about, nothing can exist by itself. It needs the support because it is all mithya. Mithya cannot exist without the support of Brahman. Therefore, it is Akhiladhara. And this Brahman alone is called Parameshwara. So Parameshwara, another name for this Brahman. When Brahman wears the costume of Maya, then it's called Parameshwara. Because without Maya, Brahman cannot become the creator. Brahman becomes the creator of the Jagat only when associated with Maya. So just like the waker, in association with the Nidra Shakti, the waker has to go to sleep. If the waker is awake, there is no dream. The waker has to go to sleep. Only the waker in association with the Nidra Shakti becomes the creator, sustainer, and resolver of the dream world. Similarly, Brahman in association with Maya Shakti, he becomes the creator, sustainer, and resolver of this entire world, this Jagat. And then Bhagavad says, Upadane akhiladhare parameshware jaganti sargasthiti layan yanti. So the word jaganti is the plural of the word jagat. Like Ramaha, Ramau, Ramaha. Similarly, jagat. It is declined as Jagat, Jagati, Jaganti. Jaganti is the plural of Jagat, meaning worlds. Bhagavad doesn't even stop with world. He says the worlds appear in this Brahman, that is Adhishthanam, who is Parameshwara. In him, the worlds appear. Jaganti, Sargasthiti Layan Yanti. Jaganti, Sargam Yanti. So these worlds are produced. How are these worlds produced? Like we have seen, from Brahman associated with Maya, first emerges the Sukshma Panchabhutani, Akasha. Akasha emerges first because it's the subtlest of the five elements. And from Akasha, Vayuhu emerges. From Vayuhu, Agnihi, Agnihi, Jalam, from Jalam, Prithvi. Why this order? Because it goes from subtler to the grossest, from the subtlest to the grossest. So these subtle Panchabhutas emerge, and then through the process of Panchikaranam, these subtle Panchabhutas combine and form the gross Panchabhutas, the grossified Panchabhutas. And these grossified Panchabhuta, Akasha, Vayuhu, Agnihi, Jalam, and Prithvi, they combine to form these Jaganti, these lokas. So there are these 14 lokas that we talk about, the 7 upper lokas, the 7 lower lokas. Bhuhu, Bhuvaha, Suvaha, Mahaha, Janaha, Tapaha, Satyam, the 7 upper lokas. And then the 7 lower lokas, Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Rasatala, Talatala, Mahatala, Patala. The 7 lower lokas. Why do we require this diversity of lokas? Because we said, why is this creation coming out in the first place? Due to the pressure of karma. There's a variety of karmas of different jivas. Different jivas have got a diversity of karmas. Some jivas have a lot of punya karma that is fructifying, and so they need to be located in the higher lokas. They may become devatas in the higher lokas. And then others need to be placed in the lower lokas because they have the papa karmas. There's the bhu-loka is there. For the manushya who have a balance of punya and papa. So these diversity of lokas are required. But we say in all of this diversity, right, one satyam is there. Just like we talked about, from this cotton emerge the sukshma fibers. And from these sukshma fibers emerges the yarn, which is slightly grosser. From the yarn emerges the fabric. From the fabric emerge the variety of these dresses like shirts, pants, veshti, angavastram, saris, etc. But if you look at the reality of all of it, it is cotton and cotton all the way. It's just cotton appearing different namas and rupas. So similarly, from Brahman emerge the Sukshma Panchabhutas and then the Sthula Panchabhutas and these 14 lokas. We say that the reality of all of this is Brahman alone. So Sarga Yanti, Sargam Yanti, Jaganti, Sargasthiti Layan Yanti. So after being created, what are they supported by? They're supported by the same material cause. Once the creation has happened, if you cannot withdraw the material, you withdraw the material, the creation, the Namarupa cannot exist by itself. Therefore, even the sthiti, the sustenance of it is due to this material cause. Upadane akhiladare parameshwar. And then layam yanti, finally it all gets resolved. When does it get resolved? When the fructifying prarabdha that brought this creation into existence, for exhausting that prarabdha, when that prarabdha is exhausted, then this entire nama rupa, the way they became manifest, the same way they become unmanifest. They go back into Brahman. And Bhagavad gives a beautiful example here. Budbudani iva varini. Budbudani iva varini. Like bubbles arise in water. Example, we can take the ocean. The ocean, there are all these waves that arise, and in the waves you can see all of this foam and bubbles, varieties of namarupas of these bubbles, different sizes and shapes, and varieties of foam, etc. They all arise in the ocean. So Bhagavad is comparing whatever is seen here to bubbles in the ocean. So all of these galaxies, different galaxies, we talked about all of these 14 lokas and all of these galaxies, they all arise in Brahman. They stay for some time and they go away. Even though the entire creation persists for a considerable length of time, if you look at individual things that appear and go away, they are not there for the entire creation. These galaxies appear at some time, and the galaxies remain, they go away. Worlds appear, worlds remain for some time, and then these worlds go away. Jaganti sarga sthiti layanya. Why are they being compared to bubbles? The galaxies are around for billions of years. Bhagavad Pada is still talking about them as being bubbles. To understand this, let us think of a graph. So if I am plotting a graph, let us say on the x-axis is the time scale, and on the y-axis is the emergence of something and the disappearance of something. So let us say I'm plotting a graph for 100 years. So in this, if I plot my life, then it emerges somewhere in the 1950s, 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, based on when this person was born. It continues for some time. And then when the person dies, there is the downturn in the graph. So in a 100-year scale, a person living 80 years, it appears to be pretty large. But now let us make it 1,000 years. So in a 1,000-year scale, you would see a flat line for the majority of the time. Then in the last 80 years or so, you see a blip, right? A blip. And now you make it 10,000 years, see a flat line, then a small blip. That's what represents the life of the person. So now let's come to the life of the galaxy itself. So if you take this galaxy, it was probably formed, 1 billion years ago or something, and it has been around for 1 billion years. So if your graph is 1 billion years, then the galaxy's life will appear to be pretty large. But now let's make this 10 billion years. Then you see a flat line and this galaxy coming and going. But then now let us come to Brahman's time scale. What is Brahman's time scale? It is eternity. Brahman never began, Brahman is never going to end. So now if we plot this graph on the eternal time scale on the x-axis, then what is the life of this galaxy? You can't even spot it in the eternity. Even 5 billion years becomes the smallest of the blip that you can't even trace. That's what a bubble is like. This bubble's life is just momentary. It appears in the sea for a few moments and disappears. That is what the life of this galaxy is in this time scale of eternity. It is nothing but a bubble coming and going. Now, what to talk about this time scale of the human being? When galaxies are like bubbles, what to talk about the life of this human bodies? So, budbudani va varini. So the next verse is also a related verse, and it presents a very similar idea. So we will complete that also. I will read that. Satchidatmanyanusyute
सच्चिदात्मन्यनुस्यूते
nitye Vishnau prakalpitaah
नित्ये विष्णौ प्रकल्पिताः
व्यक्तयो विविधाः सर्वाः
व्यक्तयो विविधा सर्वा
आटके कटकादिवत्.
हाटके कटकादिवत्.
So the next verse presents a very similar idea, and I will introduce it briefly, and then we can look at it in more detail in the next class. But like we said, there's this twofold projection in the dream. So the twofold projection in the dream happens as projection of the dream world, the insentient world, and the projection of sentient beings. So here, this verse is talking about the projection of sentient beings now. So the last verse talked about Parameshvara. Parameshvara. So Brahman, Parameshvara being another name for Brahman when associated with Maya Shakti. So here it talks about Vishnu. He talks about the Adhishthanam being Vishnu instead of Parameshwar, giving the name of Vishnu. So here Bhagavad is making an aside point also, that a lot of people get hungover about Shiva and Vishnu. Bhagavad says there's essentially no difference between Shiva and Vishnu. Brahman, they are all different names and forms given to what is essentially Brahman associated with Maya. In one context, it is called Parameshvara. In another context, the same Brahman associated with Maya is called Vishnu. And this Vishnu is Nityaha, meaning eternal. Just as we said, eternal, all-pervading consciousness. So Nitya Vishnu. So we look at the meaning of Vishnu. That which is Vyapakaha is called Vishnu. All-pervading one is called Vishnu. So Bhagavad is saying that this Adhishthanam is Vishnu, meaning all-pervading. Brahman is all-pervading. And is also Nityaha, meaning eternal. Eternal and all-pervading, meaning there is no space-wise limitation, no time-wise limitation either. So, in this Vishnu, Sarvaha Vyaktayaha, all these beings, Sarvaha Vyaktayaha, meaning all these sentient beings, Vividaha, of various forms, they are superimposed. So here, Sarvaha Vyaktayaha Prakalpitaha, meaning that the Sukshma and Sthula Shariras of the Jivas is created. So in Tattva Bodha, we have seen how this creation of the Sukshma and Sthula Shariras happen. Like we discussed, from Brahman associated with Maya, the Sukshma Panchabhutas emerge. And these Sukshma Panchabhutas themselves configure themselves into the Sukshma Shariras of the various Jivas. And then they undergo the process of Panchikaranam. And then through these Panchikrita Sukshma Panchabhutas emerge the Sthula Shariras of the various Jivas. And Vividhaha, these Jivas are of various kinds. Why are these there? There are various kinds of Jivas because of difference in karma. Like we said, some Jivas have got enough karma to become Devatas. And some Jivas have got Papa, a lot of Papa predominantly, that they need the bodies of plants or trees or animals or other lower life forms. Or they even get demoted to the lower lokas. And some jivas have got punya papas in balance, therefore they require manushya shariras. And where does this superimposition happen? In the Nitya Vishnu, who is Satchidatma. So in this all-pervading, eternal Adhishthanam, which is Brahman, this superimposition happens. The nature of Brahma is Satchit Atma. We will continue this verse in the next class. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.